used in the architecture industry. They're using VR. It's being used in the medical profession. People are actually doing surgeries ahead of time on models of, say, your heart. They can actually model your heart and then do the surgery in virtual reality before opening somebody up. And this is also being used in the therapy field for things like PTSD treatment. So it has a lot of applications.
To introduce Julia Cort, Deputy Executive Producer for NOVA, and Carla Boras, Director of Digital Video for Frontline.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to talk about virtual reality and how NOVA and Frontline are using them to tell stories in a new way. So for me, VR and 360 have enormous potential for NOVA, because I've always felt our mission is to help you get inside the scientific process, to really learn about how science is done, how scientists think, and how they come up with the solutions. And we've done this from the beginning in all our long-form documentaries that you see on television. So my very first job at NOVA, which was quite a while ago, was on a film about the pyramids. And we asked the question, how were the pyramids built? So we went to Egypt, we looked at the archaeology, we worked with archaeologists, we looked at the evidence in the ground, we looked at the pyramids, we went inside, we looked at the tools, we looked at the hieroglyphs, and then we tried to build a pyramid in 3 weeks. And it was kind of insane, very ambitious, maybe stupid, but it made a really exciting and insightful film. We actually learned things, and people loved it. And it's a lesson I learned very early on, and NOVA has continued to do that. In film after film, we've done lots of films about ancient technology where we do the same thing, and we try to learn from the evidence and repeat what ancient engineers and scientists did. And it's a lot of fun, and it really gets you inside the process. And we've done it on our digital projects as well, including NOVA Labs, which are a series of projects where students can work with real scientific data, actually become citizen scientists. And one of them is the RNA lab, and you could actually go in and work with RNA and digitally and manipulate it and try to learn how it folds up, and actual discoveries are made in this process. So I see VR and 360 as another step in this process of getting you inside the experience of doing science, going to places, seeing what it's really like, and meeting scientists right where they're working. So we were so excited when Frontline offered to collaborate with us on this project. They are really innovators and leaders in the field of VR journalism. And this seemed like a perfect way to work together on a project about Greenland. So we do a lot about climate change. Usually we do several projects a year that deal with climate change in some way. And climate change can seem very remote, distant. It can be sometimes hard to feel what the effects are. So in all our films, when we do this, we really try to bring to life the tangible details, whether it's about flooding that's caused by sea level rise in major storms like Hurricane Sandy, or ocean acidification and its effect on corals. We actually go to dive on the coral reefs, you see what's happening. So this was another opportunity on this project in Greenland to go to Greenland. So the goal is, and I hope all of you get to try out at least a few minutes of the VR walk around experience. You actually go to Greenland. You see the glaciers. You see what's happened to the glaciers. You meet scientists who are doing the real work. And you see the data that they're uncovering in a really visceral way. So that's our goal. We would love to hear what you guys think once you've tried it out. And I am very hopeful by the end of the night, after hearing Carla and all her wisdom, that you will actually know the difference between a 360 video and a walk-around virtual reality or fully immersive experience, which I didn't know when I started. So with that, I'll hand it over to Carla Boras from Frontline.
Hi. So I'm the director of digital video at Frontline, and I have to say, offered to work with NOVA is an understatement. We leapt at the chance to work with NOVA on this project because this all came about actually last fall. One of our seasoned filmmakers, Catherine Eupin, actually gave us a call, and she has done one of our really well-received films, Climate of Doubt, which looks at the denialist movement and really goes inside with that camp to sort of learn about their strategies and philosophies. And she had secured access to this special NASA expedition that was heading in just 1 week to Greenland to really better understand why these glaciers are melting faster and how that's going to impact all of us, not here, but also around the world. And so we had 1 week to make a decision about whether or not we were going in on this project, how was the best way to bring this story to life. And we immediately thought to ourselves, climate change stories are hard stories to tell. People have made up their minds, people feel like they've heard it all, and so they don't need to learn more. So as storytellers, it's really important to try to find new ways to make the material and the story compelling. And we thought virtual reality was a great way to really bring this story to life in a completely different way. And so who better to turn to than the best science storytellers in the business, NOVA. We're journalists and we know how to do journalism, but they really know how to do science storytelling. So that's how this marriage came to be last fall. But first I want to step back for a second and sort of ask all of you guys, before you came here tonight, how many of you had seen some kind of VR, just by a raise of hand, any kind of VR before tonight, not including tonight? So that's not too shabby. So we actually started making VR 360 films, which I'll explain the difference shortly, a couple of years ago. And so, we really wanted to experiment and see how far we could get. And when we started then, I would say maybe a couple hands were raised, and that's really about it. But now it's starting to really enter the mainstream. And I think a lot of people say, okay, like 3D TVs, they came and they went. Those did not take off, right? But there's a difference with VR. It's actually quite a different medium, unlike any other that's come before it. Because one, it actually is utilized across industries. So it's not just about entertainment in your living room. These are being used in the architecture industry. They're using VR. It's being used in the medical profession. People are actually doing surgeries ahead of time on models of, say, your heart. They can actually model your heart and then do the surgery in virtual reality before opening somebody up. And this is also being used in the therapy field for things like PTSD treatment. So it has a lot of applications. And then the other thing is that it's truly immersive. It's not even like an IMAX where it's a big screen and you sort of feel it. It's truly a cognitive connection, and you can't really understand that without experiencing it. So that's why I should move on, so we leave time for you guys all to experience it. But it's really entering the mainstream. So some of you guys know Silicon Valley, perhaps.
You're stepping on Richard's laps.
I'm sorry, but I walked up a hill, and on top of the hill, there was a tavern. And
So the audio's not
walked
working.
into the tavern, and I could just look everywhere, and there was a barmaid. Guess what? I walked right up to the barmaid, and I just looked at her for a really long time. This technology could change the world.
I'm not one to gush, but the possibilities of your consequence-free reality are darkly promising.
So the question is, will this change the world? Will this new technology change the world? And only time will tell, but we sure as heck are going to explore how it can change sharing our journalism and telling stories. So that's what we've been up to. So what is virtual reality? A lot of you guys raised your hands, but there's actually two different types of VR, what is called quote unquote VR. And the first one is 360 VR. And that's probably the one you've encountered a lot more than, say, this immersive walk-around type of VR. So with 360 VR, essentially it is putting a fishbowl on your head, okay? It's if you take a fishbowl and you were to put it on your head and you just stretched and wrapped the picture all the way around the fishbowl. You are in a fixed position. All you can do is swivel your head one side to the other. And that is it. It's still immersive. And you still have agency because, again, you can explore at your own will. But it's not the same as walk around VR. And it's also captured and created differently. So these are some 360 rigs. The way that we capture 360 film is essentially by putting a bunch of cameras together, and they're all collecting imagery. And then in the edit, we have to stitch all of those pictures together so you've got a seamless world, and so that everything sort of fits together. But that's quite different. Oh, sorry. And so we've actually been making 360 films since 2014. Our first one was on the Ebola outbreak, and we had a filmmaker, Dan Edge, who was doing a broadcast about the Ebola outbreak for Frontline, and he was tasked with trying to see how we can capture this in an immersive way. And so it actually went on to be nominated for an Emmy and win the Facebook Peabody Award. And so ever since, we've been trying to take people on journeys to have you experience the stories. So here's a little glimpse at the kinds of stories we've been telling in 360.
Journey through the heart of the Amazon in search of ancient ruins. To the oil fields set aflame by ISIS.
These are the Qayyara oil fields. They've been burning for the last 2-3 months.
We have 20 displaced people living in our home. If some of us don't have food, then we share what little we have.
It was Mother Nature looking to eat not only my family, but my community up.
First, we had sirens, medical department number 126.
Step inside the story.
Years of it drove a relatively sane young man insane.
Explore the clues of real-life mysteries. See the world from a new point of view. Open your eyes to Frontline.
So with these 360 stories, we're really trying to transport you to a place. So you'll see lots of different destinations, like Chernobyl. It's a place you're not probably going to get to go. You probably don't want to go. There's still radioactive material there. And so we tried to capture that experience, those environments, and really bring you on a journey. And we actually went with a guy who's a tour guide. He was actually a little boy when the disaster happened, and he ended up evacuating, and his family survived, and he's gone on to be a tour guide there. So we're trying to take you on journeys. With the other kind of VR, we're also trying to take you on journeys, but we're really trying to have you live the stories. Because in these walk-around experiences, you have agency. You get to walk around and explore wherever you're curious. We can create these stories where you actually participate in the stories. And these kinds of immersive experiences are all about being able to explore your environment. And so they're captured in a way where there's actual volume to a room. You can walk around. And we partnered actually with Emblematic Group. So the founder there is Nani de la Peña, and she's considered the godmother of VR. And so the Knight Foundation came to Frontline, and they came to Emblematic, and they said, you are VR pioneers. Frontline, you are incredible storytellers who really understand journalism and how to tell a journalistic story. Could you guys combine forces to really lead the way for other journalists and push the envelope in how we can bring stories to life in a more immersive and powerful way through the tools of VR? So the way that you create a story like Greenland Melting, which I hope you guys will all get to see, is with a variety of tools. It's a complicated process. It's not as simple as 360 where you put the camera there and you've got all the cameras and it just captures the footage. And so we did this in a variety of ways. We brought these scenes to life using tools such as, I'll hop here, photogrammetry. So what photogrammetry is taking thousands and thousands of pictures and stitching them together over a 3D model of an actual space or object such that it's real. So we could have just did a whole CGI experience about Greenland. Be like, we're gonna make it up, we're gonna just have some computer glaciers sitting over here. But we wanted to show you how NASA conducts their research, how they're doing their studies. And so it was really important to us to try to capture what they actually were doing and the actual tools that they were using. So for example, in the experience, you get to go on the Neptune, which is this NASA ship that went into the fjords there to do the studies. And so what you're seeing is not just a cartoon computer rendition of the NASA ship. It is the actual NASA ship. We spent an entire day just moving around, taking picture by picture by picture, and then spent weeks stitching that together. But then there's the question of the environment, right? The world around that boat. And so if we were there, you still have to capture that, but it's moving, and so that becomes a little bit difficult. So what we did was we filmed with 360 cameras the environment, the glaciers and the landscape around it, and we take that boat that we've done the photogrammetry, and we have the 360 and CGI rendition of the world around it. So it's really blending those two tools together. Again, in like the plane, so we take you again on a NASA plane, it's an actual NASA plane. And if you notice, just if you're curious, peek your head out the window, go ahead and look. And what you'll
also
see
from the air.
is 360 footage. So as you can see, this is the actual NASA plane that they conduct their
This is
studies,
NASA
drop
2,
probes.
the Gulfstream 3 that is my home for about 5 weeks a year when we're in Greenland taking measurements. It's probably the most important platform we have for our mission because it allows us to get to every corner of Greenland in just a few weeks.
So right there, as you see out the window, you see the glaciers. And again, we could do some CGI, but instead we tried to bring you the real thing. So what we did was we went on a helicopter that you're seeing right here, and we stuck one of those 360 cameras out, and we captured the actual glaciers for you, and then we put those outside the plane, right? And then what you also saw, of course, was the NASA scientist himself. He actually is Josh, and he led the expedition there. And so it's how to get that intelligence. We want them in our stories. They're great storytellers, and who best to help us understand the importance of their research and what they're doing than the NASA scientists themselves. But it's a challenge as to how we insert them into our scenes. So how many of you guys have watched a Frontline before? How many of you have watched a NOVA before? So, a very traditional technique. You have a scene, B-roll footage, right? And then we do a master interview somewhere else, right, with an expert, and they tell us about the story. And we intercut the two, right? So you see the B-roll, and then maybe you see the scientist, and then you go back to the B-roll. With immersive storytelling, we're trying to find new ways to do that, to have these characters inside of our stories. And the way that we do that is through this technique, or this tool called videogrammetry. So what we did was we actually brought the two scientists, Josh and Eric, to the studio in California. And it's a company called 8i, and they're the only ones out there doing this right now. So this is truly cutting edge. And what you'll see in the experience is sort of flickers and distortions in their body. And that's because we're still working on the technology. With time, the algorithm will get so good that it will be seamless, and it will look just like you look today or you look today. And the way that we do that is by putting someone in a green screen room with more than 40 cameras all the way around them. And we interview them, and then we capture that interview, and all of those cameras, we take all that footage and we stitch it into what we call a hologram, which is a 3D model of the person actually speaking there. And it's challenging as storytellers, because you can imagine being interviewed and what that might feel like if I came up to you and I've got a camera and a microphone in your face, and it's going to feel maybe a little bit awkward. Now imagine 40 cameras around you and some people hanging outside, which you can't even see. So I'm trying to ask you a question, but I'm like jumping out behind a light box, and it becomes a really a stilted way to do interviews. So you'll see some of this in the technology, or you'll see this in some of the storytelling, right? It might even feel a little stilted because the technology is still pretty nascent, and it's all getting better and better every day, such that it will feel like a much more life-like experience with every passing day. And so I wanted to show you just a little bit of what that looks like. Great. Okay.
All right, so you want to do a rehearsal? Let's do one rehearsal, and then let's go.
All right. Rehearsal up. Quiet, please.
We're downstairs inside the ship, and one of the most important things about We're downstairs inside the ship, and one of the most important things that we're measuring is just how deep the water is all around the glaciers. Inside this room, this computer equipment controls a sonar which scans the ocean bottom and tells us the depth and the shape all through the fjords. That's important because the amount of warm water that reaches the glaciers can have a huge impact on it. Just imagine a cube of ice that's sitting out in the air versus a cube of ice that's in a glass of water. The water has a lot of heat and can melt the ice really, really quickly. That's why we want to find out just how much warm water is reaching the ice and how warm that water is.
So again, I think this is a great example of how right now, because the technology is so new, it's somewhat getting in the way of the storytelling. So, you know, and Julia and Paula can probably chime in here, but for a Frontline, when we interview someone, it might be 2 hours, it might be 4 hours. We might go back to them again and again, and you can amass so much footage and so much of the story you can draw out from them. With this kind of technology being as new as it is, the problem becomes with all of those cameras, there's so much footage trying to sit in that cloud, you can record for only 40 minutes. So you have to get your interview done perfectly without a hitch in 40 minutes. And so there's all sorts of ways where I think our storytelling will get better, because that is a problem that we'll overcome with time, you know? And so this experience that you see today is 11 minutes. There may come a time when it's like a 30, 45 minute, really, truly in-depth experience. But this is sort of, again, early days for the state of VR. So I want to do some quick science, because that's what we're here for, is the Science Cafe. And so we actually, as part of our explorations of VR, were tasked to do some studies about viewers and how they perceived this VR. And a couple of things that we wanted to understand from people after we created this experience was, do attitudes shift? Was there greater empathy and concern for the issue? What were people able to learn and retain? And that's a key one that I'm going to come back to. Because our hope, of course, was with climate change, climate change stories, people can really shut down. They've made up their minds. No matter what facts you tell them, they're not going to hear it. So can you bring them somewhere, have them experience something in such a visceral, immersive way that you might be able to shift the needle a little bit? And so we wanted to understand, is that possible to shift the attitudes? And again, can you learn anything in VR, which I think is a critical situation. So how many of you guys had a chance to watch the walk around VR? Okay, so we're gonna do a little study, and it's not the scientific method, it's not gonna be as rigorous as that, it's gonna be completely anecdotal. But I wanna ask you a question. It's a detailed question. It's a piece of information that was conveyed in the film. And I'll give you an A, B, C, D kind of answer, and you just raise your hands. Okay, so if all of Greenland melted, by how much would it raise global sea level? Okay, so by more than 5 feet, raise your hand if you think it was by more than 5 feet, if you think that's like what you heard. Okay, by more than 10 feet? By more than 15 feet? By more than 20 feet? So the answer was 20. But what you're finding, yes, it's by 20 feet or more. So the thing is, details, learning very specific details right now are very hard. And we think that that's for two reasons. One is people aren't used to VR yet, right? So there will be some sort of habituation as people get used to watching VR and they do it every day. They're not going to be as wrapped up in the fact that, you know, hey, I can teleport over here, or like I can wander over here. Or did you know you can look into the person? Like you can try it. Actually step into the character. You can do it. It's kind of freaky. You can see into their legs and up into their brain. It's bizarre. But people will get used to these things. But right now there's so much stimulus. There's so much to look at that it's really hard to absorb that. That being said, and I have it here. That being said, what we found in this research is that people are actually really caring about these subjects more. They found it more personal. They found it more important after viewing it. So while you don't take away perhaps some of these details, you do walk away with perhaps an experience that changes your mind in some ways. So again, I think it's something that we all have to work out the kinks of for storytelling, because we want people to learn. I mean, that's what we do in our films. And so I think it's just about mastering storytelling in this new kind of way. So I already went over that. So that's a little bit about where we are. And so for some of you guys who are saying to yourself, oh, I don't know, it's kind of funky, it's kind of weird, it feels like 3D TV is just going to be a fad and a craze, I wanted to read this quote. And this is from a New York Times review of the very early television. And so it said, the images transmitted was faint and often blurred. It has yet to be seen to what extent further development will carry Mr. Bard's system towards practical use. He said, no way are people going to sit in front of this box for hours on end. We're busy people. We have things to do. So I say to you all, we'll have to see where 360 and VR can take us with storytelling. So that's it for me. You want to open it to questions?
I actually have a question. The green screen room, does the cameras on one side catch the cameras on the other side in screenshot, and how do you get rid of them?
So that is absolutely the kinds of things that happen. So they're actually taking these feeds, they have a whole algorithm that's proprietary. And so that's why very few of these companies are able to do it. And they don't let you know the secret sauce of it. But they've basically found a way to just take the image of the body and stitch that together in, again, over this 3D mesh of the person as they're talking. But it is complications like that. Even with 360 filmmaking, one of the big challenges you have is, so you put the camera here, but what about the stick that it's on? Or what about the filmmaker them very self, right? Like I'm here and I'm trying to interview, it's like you're gonna catch me. So we've come up with a few techniques. For the tripod, what you do is you just take a still picture and you paste the still picture over the tripod bottom. And for the person, you kind of just have to hide. You run and hide. There was one film that was done on a beach, and they were really at a loss for, like, how do we capture this? We have a crew of 10 people. This was a feature, not a documentary. And they all found the perfect angle behind a dune by which all 15 of them could line up in a single file and not be seen. So these are new challenges. Like, it's real.
But there were definitely things that we had wanted to do, but we just couldn't because of that technology. If you get to the point in the plane, Josh is talking about this probe. What they do in the plane is they drop a probe down over and over again. It's a really interesting and intricate probe that it drops down, and it has a radio on it, and a weight with a sensor. So it drops down, it lands in the water, it floats, and then a weight with a sensor goes plunging down through the water, and it's got a cable on it, and it's taking readings, and through the cable it's sending data up to the buoy, and the buoy has a transmitter that transmits the data up to the plane. And they do this over and over again, and that's how they are gathering the information about the temperature and the salinity and the depth of the water. And when it hits the bottom, it kind of breaks, and then it floats back to the top. So we had really wanted Josh to hold the probe
us the real
and
thing.
explain how it worked. And basically, you can't do that.
To your point, because again, if the camera is capturing that probe, it means it's not capturing the stomach here.
Yeah.
And so when someone's standing from this side, your stomach's going to be missing, so it doesn't
Yeah.
work. So,
And the other issue was clearly, you know, this is sometimes an issue just with 2D green screen technology, but essentially people couldn't stand there like this, or they couldn't have their fingers open or, you know, point. They could if they were moving quickly, but if they weren't moving quickly, it would just be too hard to separate out all those fingers and get them in 3 dimensions. So if you notice, you'll see some of the scientists talk like basically with little flipper hands. And that's because they were instructed to do so, because otherwise there would be too much artifacting around their
you
fingers.
kept hearing people scream, paddle hands,
Paddle
hands.
Yes, and they had to stay very much in that location. So they couldn't, you know, you could see in their performance as it ends up becomes a little bit, it's constrained. It's constrained because they have to stay right in that spot.
Mm-hmm. I didn't do any walk around when I tested it, so I didn't know that that could be done. I checked on my phone afterwards, and I could just twist it around and see in different places. If I were to walk with my phone, would that do the same thing?
It would not do the same thing. It's all footage that's captured from a fixed position, and that's why you can get no closer to objects or further from objects, because that's how the footage came in. But it's a real issue because, again, in a regular documentary, you might get to a poignant moment where someone's saying something and they're tearing up, and what you would do as a cinematographer is you're going to get the close-up, right? So you can really feel and see that emotion in their face. And in 360, you can't do that because the camera is stuck there. So that's 360. What you saw with the headset and what you can just see on your phone like that is 360 video. And we're still trying to, so like this Greenland experience, we'll export it as a 360 experience. It won't be the same as what you experience as walk around.
It'll be something like what you saw when we projected a bit of that, except you'll be able to turn your head and see all around, but you won't be able to change your relationship to the environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions. So my first question is, what programs do you use to stitch it together?
That's a great question. So with the 360 filmmaking, let's say you're an editor for a NOVA or a Frontline. You actually don't need to learn a new software. So there's some mystery because people are like, ooh, it's so technical, I don't know, 360 filmmaking, we can't do that, that's difficult. And it's not. So they often use a software called Premiere to edit it. And that's what we would edit, for example, perhaps Adobe Premiere. And what you have to do is first, and it depends on your camera, bring all the images together, right? So that they get pieced together, so that basically if your face was cut along a seam, you don't want one eye up here, like a Picasso, right? We need to get your eyes corrected. So a lot of these cameras come with software already that they just basically connect the footage together. It's another so there's all sorts of different softwares to do that. But to make your film, to create your story, it's done in Premiere. And I think Barry's here. Barry, are you here still? Yeah. So go ahead, can you name the software? Barry's actually one of our editors at Frontline. He's made a 360 film himself. So go on up, Barry. And so just coming up with the name of the stitching software for 360. So one of the things is Metal Skybox is a new tool that we use. And what's really cool about that, again, is editors like Barry, they already know After Effects, and it's just a simple plugin where then you create your own 360 animated worlds. So all tools actually that we kind of generally know. Now for something like this walk-around experience, that's a gaming software. So people who know how to make, let's say, like, I don't even know what the latest games are out there. There's ones shoot 'em up games, I don't know. But the people who make those games,
Carla doesn't have time.
I don't have time for games. It's documentaries and nonfiction only for me. But basically, it's a gaming engine where you build these worlds.
But
And then,
some of the 360 you can do just even with 2 fisheye cameras,
Yep,
right?
2
I mean,
cameras.
some of them are very simple, so then there's just one seam. And then when we were working on our rough cuts, we had very kind of rough cuts of the scenes. And you could see the seams. And then finally when we decided, all right, these are the shots, then they would go and clean up and do the work to really make it smooth.
And then my second question was that you said that you couldn't do the probe because then it would cut out his stomach. Could you just take a picture of his stomach and stitch that in, or is that not possible?
So it's an excellent question because it's kind of like the 360 footage where I said, remember you got the tripod, so you could just take the picture. The thing is, with the 360 filming, the ground's static, right? So that carpet's not moving, right? The grass, if it's not too windy, isn't moving. So no one will see the difference. The thing is, you could, but we're all moving and our clothes even slightly moves. So it would look a little bit funky. It would look a little bit odd to have something so stationary, and you would have to, again, have it moving with him as he moves. So it would just look too jarring, and I think take you out of the story if we were to do that. It's a good question.
So that's the key. If you think of the environments are done with photogrammetry, so those are still photographs, but the people are done with videogrammetry. So that's a lot of frames of information because everything is in motion. Yeah, but he would then have to move in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Tricky. It was frustrating. we feel your pain. We wanted to do it.
Couldn't you put the probe on the table and have him explain it?
So the thing is, you could do photogrammetry of a probe. You are correct. We could take lots of pictures.
That's actually what they did in the end, right?
Yeah.
The probe that you see is actually a CGI
model of it.
Model based on photogrammetry of the probe. That was our solution.
Yes.
Any other questions?
What do you guys think about augmented reality?
I love it and want to learn more. So how many of you guys have experienced AR, augmented reality? So I see a few hands. How many of you guys have played Pokemon? Okay, so you have explored. Pokemon Go, sorry, Pokemon Go. Yeah. So you have. How many of you guys have been on Snapchat before? Maybe used a filter, right? So actually AR is starting to infiltrate our worlds already. Facebook is now copycatting Snapchat and coming out with filters. And here's something that's like pretty trippy. We'll have to see if they get there. But they're working right now. Facebook is, for a fact, Facebook and Oculus, glasses. So just like the glasses you're wearing, is it possible that it could be feeding information on the screen? So for example, let's say you are at an important meeting, right? And you're giving this presentation and you're trying to remember, what was the budget number again? So you could say, well, the budget number is, and through artificial intelligence, it registers, hey, you want to know the budget for X, and it can actually run through its system, pull up the budget information and give it to you. Or let's say, okay, you're in the supermarket shopping and you just bump into this person, you're like, oh my gosh, I should know their name, I should know their name. You can be like, hey, and it'll pull up using facial recognition, Susie. So it's like, hey, Susie, I know your name. So,
or you could be shopping for a dress and trying one on and say, oh, I really like this, but what it would look like in red. And then it would automatically change the color for
so
you.
It's not just entertainment, it can be a game changer for how we live.
But it's the combination of actually seeing the actual environment you're in, and then displaying more information on top of that or within it. So if you haven't done Snapchat, or maybe you've seen pictures, you can make a face and stick out your tongue, and then like a dog's tongue will come out, or you'll have whiskers, and we'll actually track
where
with
you're moving.
It spots your eyes and your nose and your mouth, and it stays on you. It's actually pretty amazing technology.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potential there, and
very exciting.
We want to explore it.
Sure. Well, I mean, we just went to, he was saying how could AR be used especially with news and education. So we actually went to the Smithsonian to show them our Greenland project. And lo and behold, they came up with this incredible AR app that really adds this whole new layer of learning on top of this exhibit that they weren't getting much foot traffic to. It's one of the oldest exhibits in the museum, and they're not allowed to touch it because, again, it has some real value in keeping it exactly how it was. How many years ago? Maybe
it was from like the 1860s, I think.
Exactly.
It was one of the original exhibits.
So they don't want to just tear it down.
It's called the Hall of Bones.
Hall of Bones, exactly. They don't want to tear it down and just make it modern and put some screens on it, but they do want to make it more engaging. They want people to learn in new ways. So with their app, basically, there's skeletons, right? Hall of Bones, right? So there's, say, a skeleton of some kind of reptile creature. And you're wondering to yourself, I wonder what it looked like, 100 years ago, or not even 100 years, 50 years ago. Let's say it's a crocodile, and you're like, I wonder what that crocodile looked like. And you took out your phone, and you placed it over the skeleton, and you got to see the actual creature and what it actually looked like. So there's all sorts of ways to layer in more information into our worlds and educate ourselves and maybe localize some of the reporting that we do too, and really bring it home to your community and where you're at.
We have a question over here.
So you said you have a bunch of shows that do the 360 already. Where do I suppose I get that from the web, and how do you want me to view it? And then the second thing is with the virtual reality, what kind of equipment do I use to view that? Is there a certain headset, or does it support all?
Absolutely. So in terms of our 360 stories, right now they're in our app, our Frontline VR app, which the Samsung Gear headset allows you to view. So you go into an Oculus store, it's perfectly free, and you can watch it in that. That being said, we're launching a VR week at Frontline on July 24th. And so we're going to put all of our documentaries on YouTube. Right now we have the Greenland Project and one other, but we're going to put our whole collection for everyone to see, and we'll have a 360 player such that if you just have any phone, you can watch it like this, or if you have a cardboard, you can watch it in the cardboard. And even if you got a Gear, there's a YouTube app, so you could watch the whole collection that way. So we're trying to really make sure it reaches a wider audience.
So you can watch the Greenland 360 video today now on your phone, if you have the YouTube app, and just search for "Why is Greenland melting?" and it will come up. And then if you have cardboards, there's a little cardboard symbol, and you press that, and then you can watch in the cardboard and see it in stereo. But otherwise, you can just play it. And
Explain to others what the cardboard is.
Sure, the cardboard, you've got an example. Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is really the cheapest and easiest way to watch immersive 360 stories. They're really cheap. I mean, you can get these things on Amazon for, like $10. And so it just folds in, and again, it allows for the full immersive world. Again, you can't get closer to objects, but
so you put
can
your phone inside.
You just simply put it in here, and then you can watch it like that. Now, as for VR, it's a challenge. It's a huge distribution challenge, and it's a really difficult one for journalists because we do journalism in the public interest, right? And there's the potential for a real divide. How many people, first of all, can afford to have one of these, in their home? With every day, it actually is starting to increase, and the increase in terms of the number of homes that it's in, and prices are dropping. So there's a couple headsets that are known for walk-around VR. So HTC Vive, which is this one, an Oculus Rift, they're partnered with Facebook, and the Sony PlayStation has a kit that attaches. And so those are sort of the predominant ones. But it's, again, a situation of time will tell. A lot of people have Sony PlayStations in their home already. And so it's about these kits and these headsets becoming lower in cost. Oculus Rift, I think, cut their price literally like this week.
But so these kinds of systems are in about 2 million homes now?
Yeah, so the walkarounds are in over 2 million homes right now.
I mean, they're basically for gaming. That's what they're used. And so this experience will actually be distributed through the gaming platform Steam.
As free content.
Yeah.
Free
content.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, there's one in the back over here.
There's questions over here. That's okay.
My question is university also getting to a divide
Carla was just saying
Carla,
this. She was talking about how chemistry can be brought to life, and imagine, again, you can see like the neurons.
You can manipulate the molecules, you could put them together, take them apart.
Could you repeat the question for everyone?
Yeah, so the question was, are we seeing these in universities yet? Are they being used in an education capacity? And the answer is yes. I went to BC, and I've seen where they're starting to get headsets and use them. There's a bunch of different, Columbia is starting to use them, NYU has an institute that's starting to use them. So it's slow, because also it's like, who's making great content out there right now? It's pretty challenging to make. So I think there needs to be also more storytellers and people creating these high-end stories too, to get anything from a university to a high school interested in investing in this kind of equipment.
All right, we have time for one last question.
Is there someone over here?
Yep.
Oh.
Are there any courses or workshops that are geared towards journalists right now, where you can go and learn more about VR storytelling?
Yeah, so actually Google launched an initiative specifically for that, to really disseminate learnings and spread sort of best practices, and it's Google 360. And if you just look that up there, again, it's a community. We're all trying to make ourselves better storytellers, to find, again, more ways to tell compelling journalism. And so I think it's also funded by the Knight Foundation. They help support that. So again, we'll be sharing a lot of learnings, and we're actually going to share our learnings. That's part of the Knight Foundation grant. So we're actually writing a whole report about sort of best practices with technology, best practices with storytelling, the opportunities, the challenges we face as journalists trying to create these stories, and we'll put that out for the public as well.
When is that coming out?
So that's an excellent question. I'm busy writing it with my colleagues, and so definitely I would say in the next couple of months.
Okay, cool, thank you.
What is that will come out in a couple of months?
It's a report, our research on sort of best practices for journalists who want to tell stories like this.
Oh, so that's not being published by you?
It's by us. That one is by us, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Carla, and thank you so much, Julia, for being here today.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank all of you.
The interesting thing is, the fascinating thing, and it's kind of an enigma, is why the corona, which is the sun's atmosphere, is actually hotter than the surface of the sun itself. Additionally, they'll be learning about more about how to predict solar storms, which are emitted from the sun with electromagnetic radiation and can easily bring down the grid and all forms of communication. So we need to really learn. We're so dependent on our electronics. We really need to learn more about those.